Hello fellow viewers, welcome to my newly created channel. This YouTube channel will discuss the philosophy and the religious aspects behind George Lucas's fan favorite Star Wars film, and we will also try to analyze the last few movies that were recently created by Disney. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty details of philosophy. And most important of all, metaphysics. Metaphysics is a branch of philosophy that deals with understanding the basis of human life. It's usually found in very abstract concepts that include time, space, identity, and even knowing. It makes me think of the movie Interstellar. Interstellar was based off of three-dimensional beings interacting with aliens from a fourth dimension. And those three-dimensional beings were us. Yet an interesting fact of the philosophy of human beings is that when we look at any picture or even view reality from our world, we see everything in 2D pictures, basically. What this means is that when you take a picture of what you're seeing, it'll come out in 2D. And that's exactly how we view it. We see it in 2D. And since we 3D beings see in 2D, 4D beings are assumed to see in 3D. But moving on, staying on this topic of reality and how reality is what we see or what we notice in our lives, we are trying to figure out how objective can humans be when they view reality. Like, reality is very subjective in millions of ways, and that's due to the topic of social construction, which is basically when we see and we interpret what we see and explain it to ourselves using social concepts. For example, if we see a bruised man walking towards us, we assume that since he's like, his clothes are torn up, we assume that he's homeless or he's just recently been in a fight. That is a result of our brain processing in social aspects rather than just identifying the physical aspects of him, like the bruised and tattered shirt and the bruised face. But moving on, nevertheless, some social constructions lead to very different human realities. We all have very different realities, which is true in most cases. Like my parents, when they see the same laptop as I do, they're struck by wonder and awe because that laptop never existed in the past, especially when they were alive. Only in the late 1900s were they able to shift from those big, huge machines that took forever to gather information to these small, portable handbook laptops that we have today. And however, in our life, in the lives of many Generation Z children like me, we take these things for granted rather than as a privilege, as we were born with the right to these laptops and new devices like phones, smartphones, smartwatches. We were born with them, so we assume them to just be a part of life, and they don't fill us with as much wonder as they would fill an adult with. So, how we perceive our mind and reality is very important. And also, now I would like to move on to the topic of agency and free will. Free will is basically that we believe that we have the ability to control our actions and that we are able to make many different choices without being controlled by anyone. Wouldn't you agree that everything we do, we just sort of assume that we are making this decision wholly by ourselves? Like, I'm making the decision to record this video right now. There are no underlying circumstances based on someone else that require me to record this video right now. This concept is ideal to the survival of society this far because it's visualized in many religions and cultures across the world that use the concept of free will, as God gave us free will rather than making us all do the right thing all the time, because that would make us robots, and humans are defined by their imperfections. And so in essence, what I'm trying to say is that Free will is what gives us moral responsibility. It allows us to be people that we want to be. We know that we have the ability to do right, and we control our actions, so we have a moral obligation to do the right thing. However, when we realize that we actually don't have free will as a result of numerous scientific research articles that have been published by neuroscientists and psychologists, your brain unconsciously determines what action you will do milliseconds before we actually consciously perceive that we will do this action. And so scientists viewing our brain are capable of knowing our very own actions before we ourselves are able to know that we will act upon that. It's almost like a predestined world where everything we do has already been decided. But that's not actually true. That's a common misconception. This leads to the topic of fatalism, where everything is already locked in and determined duly by fate. But that's not the case. You still have to do certain things in order for your reward to happen or your result to happen. For example, as a podcast I listened to from a BBC News network explains, it's like an interview, a job interview. Fatalism basically depends on you all automatically getting the job, even if you don't go to the interview, even if you sleep in late early and you don't go to your job on time, you don't prepare for the interview, you don't do anything for the interview, and you still get the job. But basically what I'm trying to say is that even though free will doesn't exist, it's not at the opposite end of the spectrum, which is where determinism comes in. Determinism is the middle ground between fatalism and free will. Determinism is the causal chain of events that causes certain events to happen. So if you didn't go to the interview, you won't get the job. But if you go to the interview, you will get the job. And so I'm trying to figure out how this all relates to Star Wars, but it does. As we see, the whole saga revolves around the Skywalker lineage and how Anakin was supposedly the chosen one who would bring balance to the Force.
How feel you?
Cold, sir.
Afraid, are you?
No, sir.
See through you. We can.
Be mindful of your feelings.
Your thoughts dwell on your mother.
I miss her.
Afraid to lose her, I think.
What does that got to do with anything?
Everything. Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. I sense much fear in you.
But as you may see here in this clip of Yoda telling young Anakin, the Padawan learner, that they sense strong fear and a clouded future by the dark side, Anakin is actually going to shift to the dark side to become Darth Vader, and the Jedi in a sense predicted that. And Anakin at the time, he doesn't understand this. He thinks this is BS. He can't believe that he would ever join the dark side. The dark side is just a big no-no to him. The light side is where it's at. That's where his true heart resides for the moment, though. And then he shifts to the dark side. Was it possible for him to prevent this? Was it possible for him to save Padme from death? Ask your questions in the YouTube chat, and for now, that is a wrap of episode 1 of Philosophy in the Star Wars World. Thank you, and have a great night. Thanks for listening.